JB Knowledge Podcast Network.
On episode 61 of the Insurtech Geek Podcast, we're talking about AI-driven industry identification with Alan Ringvald from Relativity6. The Insurtech Geek Podcast, powered by JB Knowledge, is all about technology that is transforming and disrupting the insurance world. We'll be interviewing guests and doing deep dives into specific technologies that we see changing the industry. We're taking you on a journey through insurance tech, so enjoy the ride and geek out. All right. It's another wonderful summer day that we are recording this. We do not have our James Benham, our esteemed founder and original host. You're stuck with me, the co-host, and I'm very excited. So this is the first time I get to read the intros and outros. So for you loyal listeners, you'll notice that there's a change there. So hopefully I do it as well as James, and he always starts with the all right. So I have to give you the tribute there. James, hope you are doing well. We will hold the fort down as I'm sure you're enjoying a wonderful summer off of Lake Michigan. But I'm excited today for our guest, Alan Ringvald from Relativity6. And Alan and I have crossed paths a couple of times on a couple of different continents. So it's great to finally have you on the podcast, Alan. How are you?
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Doing well. Checking in from sunny and wildfiery Los Angeles. Excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, I, of course, with all of the travel restrictions now, haven't left the beautiful state of Texas in over a year. But LA was actually where we were planning to do our family vacation last summer before everything kind of collapsed. So I definitely hope to get back out there again soon. And we're having very un-Texas-like weather here. We're talking with our producer, Jim Greenlee, right before we jumped on that it's been raining here. Usually this is the time that it's sunny. It's like a broken record, I guess, a little bit like LA, where we don't get the rain for like 3 months. Typically, it's hotter here, where it's the only question of the weather is whether it's going to break 100 that day or not, but it's always in the 90s. We're kind of hanging out in the pool, and we've been struggling to break 80s. And, I don't think that I would call this a marine layer where I'm sitting in San Antonio because we don't have a body of water close by, but it's kind of felt like that. So it's been very strange. Before we get started with our interview with Alan, don't forget that you can subscribe to the Insurtech Geek Podcast by texting Geek Out to 66866. That's Geek Out to 66866, and make sure you never miss an episode. So back to Alan Ringvald from Relativity6. And for those of you that, again, are loyal listeners of the podcast, you know that we'll be talking all about Alan's startup and who Relativity6 is, what they do. And I'd like to talk a little bit about their evolution, because Alan and I have been chatting about that. And as I've mentioned, we've connected at points kind of along this journey. But before we do that, we always like to get to know a little bit about our guests in terms of their background. So as James would ask, give us your background. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? And what did you think you were going to be doing? And I'm going to guess it was not being in the insurance industry.
No, it was a pleasant surprise to me and everyone around me, actually, that I'm here right now. But yeah, long story short, I'm a Boston guy, so grew up on the East Coast. Kind of wanted to do like entrepreneurial stuff. I know it's cliche, but as a kid, you kind of know when that's kind of your path. So growing up in Boston, I had a snow shoveling business, of course. I was selling candy to kids in my elementary school. It was just all those little signals of, oh man, this guy's probably not going to be able to work at a company one day. So had that progression growing up, and got myself into entrepreneurial thing for real right when I was a freshman, sophomore in college. I just couldn't wait. So I just right off the bat went out and started my first actual company. And it was funny. It was absolutely nothing to do with insurance. It was actually, I was sitting there in my dorm room and realizing just how many different delivery services and services in general all the kids around me were using, and realized there was no centralized system for that yet. I'm dating myself, but this is 2001. So that e-commerce really hadn't been a thing. Platforms really hadn't been a thing. So I went out and built a platform that connected all the laundry vendors, food delivery vendors in my college town to actual students, and kind of caught the bug there. It's one of those like classic cases of your first startup does well and you think it's easy kind of a deal. Like we grew really quickly, grew to 15 schools within like a year and a half. I sold the company, like was able to pay for my college education from it. It got me my next job. So I was like, oh man, like I could do this, like no problem. So, and I sold the company when I was 22. So I was like, pretty sure I knew what I was doing, and boy, was I wrong. But yeah, so I started there, spent the next 5 years at Google, actually. So it's kind of like my first corporate-y experience. And this is Google, again, dating myself, 2006, right? So '06 Google, had just gone public, was kind of figuring itself out. I kind of liken it to like a teenager going through puberty kind of a thing, like growing like crazy, not really sure like what to do with your limbs kind of a thing. Or like, so kind of I was around for the explosive growth, which was cool because I got to do a million different things. So was still very entrepreneurial in that sense. But literally like every week they're hiring thousands of people. So like the layers of bureaucracy just increase. So, 5 years in, I was kind of ready to leave. But what happened was I got a phone call from, and I moved to San Francisco for this, but I got a phone call from this guy in Boston who said, I'm so upset by the way that corporations are, especially like in the confection industry, like what they're doing to kids. They're feeding them corn syrup. It's awful. Like there's so much poison out there, but it's marketed in a way that makes kids want it. Could we build a brand and a confection company that competed with Snickers, Reese's, M&Ms, but was very sustainable, like sustainable ingredients, like good for you stuff, like actually add fiber to a Snickers type bar, like crazy stuff like that. And he convinced me to quit Google. And within like a week, I moved back to Boston and, started this candy company, which was a really kind of interesting experience. Did that for about 2 years. We actually grew to 30,000 stores. So we got into a lot of locations. It was my first experience with celebrity and celebrity branding and all the crazy things associated with that whole world. Because what we did, our strategy was, instead of having a huge marketing budget, we tried to get as many, I guess, famous people as possible to be a part of the brand for discounted equity. It was kind of the idea. And it was just a really interesting way to go about it. It did not do well for a while. We raised, kind of a nightmare. We raised a lot of money. We got into a lot of stores, but the second we got into the store, nobody bought the product, which was a whole different lesson. But, had to learn through that.
So can you give us some of those celebrities?
Absolutely. So
I don't know if you can name drop here, but
I can, and I feel horrible doing it. It's not me whatsoever. I don't know any of these people personally, by the way, so it's not me being cool. But like honestly, like it started with Tom Brady, and Tom asked his wife to join. Giselle happens to have an ex-boyfriend named Leonardo DiCaprio. He joined on. Yada, yada, yada. Like Matt Damon came to Walmart and pitched for us. Giselle went to Target. Like Tom Brady went to CVS. Like it was like that. And like, you bring a celebrity into a room and, into a CVS buyer, it helps. So that was kind of the strategy, and we got distribution. The thing we didn't realize was the battle actually starts when you get into a store. There's so much competition. You really need to do a lot of marketing and awareness before the consumer steps in. You can have all the great placement in the world, but if no one's familiar with you, then it's harder. And this is at a time when social media was not a thing, really. It was YouTube and a little bit of Twitter, but we went digital, social, but it was a little early, actually. So, but totally crazy, random experience. I didn't last too long there, left after 2 years, and a really interesting thing happened. So we worked with a lot of, like celebrities, a lot of professional athletes. There was one athlete who was on the roster that, became friendly with. Not a huge name at the time, but he was a player on the New England Patriots, a wide receiver, really nice guy. And he was basically like, he came to me and he was like, look, like, my agent doesn't really do much for me on the marketing side. No one really knows who I am. Do you want to do something? Like, is there anything you think? And so like that, it was a really interesting moment, because that started a company called Super Digital, which what we did there, the core insight was, even if you're not Tom Brady, if you're a starting wide receiver on, on a National Football League team, you probably have 7 or 8, 9 million people who do know who you are, who care who you are. But you need to, and this is cliche because it actually is what the world is today, but created unique platforms for this player to connect straight to the fans. Because at the time he was getting, you would laugh at the money he was getting from his traditional shoe deal. It was nothing. So going from that to, exponentially more and having a community and building and monetizing was novel at the time. And, everyone does it now, but that's what I did. We built a roster of athletes. So I did that for a while, about 2.5 years, and then decided to go off to grad school. I went to MIT, which is a place I'd always wanted to go, always admired from afar, from Boston, but literally didn't even know anyone who went there when growing up. It's just not a thing for normal people like me, but had the opportunity to go there. And that's how I started Relativity6. And apologies for the long-winded intro there, everybody, but that's me.
Yeah, it's great, Alan. And I think people love hearing these stories. They love hearing that various backgrounds. I am feeling very, imposter syndrome a little bit because, I was at a carrier this whole time. So you're having all these amazing career experiences and I'm going from,
Rob, you're a
to
legend.
senior underwriter to eventually managing the team. So yeah, it's like, wow, the diversity of experiences that you had is pretty amazing. And it feels like, Alan, one of the threads is that you were really early on to things, right? I mean, the delivery experience you mentioned, college bellhop, right? The Unreal Candy and kind of influential marketing, and then super digital, like all of these were in a lot of ways kind of ahead of their time, right? Which are common, I think, about DoorDash and Grubhub now and everything. I mean, you just needed a pandemic, right, I guess, to really probably go
exactly.
even bigger. So, yeah, just a really amazing, I guess, timing and kind of prescience on your part for your career, intentionally or not.
Unintentional, no, not on purpose. Yeah.
Unintentional. Take full credit. Take full credit. Everyone else would. You're such a modest guy, Alan. Tell me a little bit about. So you mentioned, eventually, right? You end up at MIT for your grad study, get your MBA. You're an entrepreneur in residence, and then Relativity6 comes from there. So maybe you can share a little bit about the genesis of Relativity6.
Yeah, absolutely. I was always excited about MIT just because of the level of talent, the people that they bring in there. It's incredible, honestly, the professors, the students, all that. So knowing that coming in, I kind of spent the most of my time. Yes, class was important, no doubt. I did go to most of my classes, but I spent a lot more of my time meeting people, making friends, and not just with students, with professors, just having conversations, having coffee, like really exploring. I kind of saw it as like, I'd been in the field for so long. It was pretty heavenly to be able to sit in a classroom and talk to people and explore. And so it's the ultimate luxury if you can do it. I got a lot out of it. And that's where I met my co-founder, Abraham, who's this brilliant data scientist. We got along immediately. He's also an entrepreneur. So we connected on that level, and we ended up nerding out on, of all things, 1 minute, I was doing Tom Brady stuff. Now we were nerding out on lifetime value, LTV. As a marketer, as a product person, it's the holy grail. It's something that everyone talks about ad nauseum, right? Executives love to talk about it. Everyone loves to, marketing people love to talk about it. Salespeople love to talk about it, but it's very rarely actioned or accurate, right? It's kind of one of those nebulous kind of topics. So we wanted to take that on. We thought LTV was broken. And Abraham being a great data scientist, we thought, could we apply machine learning to this problem in a way that actually added value? It's kind of like the theme of a lot of the stuff that I do is is it cool and does it add value? And if it's not both, it's probably something you shouldn't be spending your time on. So it's always cool, LTV is really interesting, but where's the value out of this, right? Can AI ML add value to what we're doing here? And we built a platform, and honestly, Rob, based on all this other startup experience, I did not want to get into another one. I really didn't. It's too hard. It's too uncertain. It's too many challenges, and a lot of times not enough reward, really. You hear about the, if you're not in it, you hear about the success stories, but in it, you see all your colleagues not have success a lot of the time, but work harder and be more talented than anybody else and still not make it. So I didn't want it, honestly, but we wrote this thesis, and man, like I'd never gotten such a great response from companies than when I was researching this topic and seeing if we could be helpful here. And right in school, we had huge companies give us all their data, like 20, 30, 40 years worth of their transaction data to try to help them figure out LTV a little bit better. So it was like, wow, it was a really interesting thing in writing this thesis with Abe, my co-founder, and then seeing the reaction got us excited that this was a real problem to solve. So probably shouldn't have, but went for it at the time. You have student loans and you probably get a job, but it did not do that. Took that road. And yeah, we had this LTV platform. What it did was predict retention, like the propensity for a customer to stay a customer, and also the propensity for a customer to buy more stuff. Basically, like simply put, was the expression of the platform. Didn't start in insurance. Our first customer ever was an aircraft manufacturer, aircraft OEM. Actually got us our first huge contract. We beat out a lot of big companies to get it. So it's kind of like a huge moment right when we started. And it started, and that win got us the first angel investment. So it all kind of started going from there. And we went out to market with a lifetime value platform. We worked in a lot of industries. 2 years into the company, we found this company that, I'm so sorry, Brent, for saying this. I'd never heard of Willis Towers Watson. It's a huge broker, but from not being in the space, I was like, oh, cool. Like these guys want to work with us. And those were the guys that like sat us down and said, like, you have no idea how valuable LTV is for the broker world, the the carrier world, the broader insurance world. Let me teach you the ways. So they were kind of like our Jedi masters of like teaching us everything about insurance, building a product specifically for Willis Towers Watson. So it kind of got us momentum in insurance. And then we spent 2 years just working with carriers and brokers with LTV. And and I can stop there because it's the story does change from that spot. But
sure, I want to get to some of the pivots that you've made along the way, but I just quickly reflect on, I remember actually trying to tackle this problem at USA in 2008, because not only did they have the insurance company, but they had a bank and an investment company. And so you're looking at people, right, that are maybe really profitable credit card consumer, right, but then they keep having losses on the insurance side. And, USA customers relative to others are just phenomenally loyal, right, because you've got this affinity with the military. And so customer acquisition costs kind of amortized over the life of the customer is just pretty amazing. And I know it influenced like underwriting decisions that we were making. You mentioned, being in Los Angeles and some of the wildfire threat that you face. And, it's pretty remarkable looking at some of the statistics to say, hey, I'm not just underwriting their wildfire risk today, but I'm actually underwriting their wildfire risk 30 years from now, because there's a 50-50 probability that same customer is going to be with me for 30 years. Most companies don't think that far out. It's pretty remarkable. And I am curious, you mentioned obviously Willis Towers Watson, huge broker, very, very well connected, but I mentioned both on the kind of the agent broker side and the carrier side. So maybe you can tell us the difference as you kind of discovered both, and how did they, because I could see that they might view lifetime value and how they perceive their customers differently. I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, no, totally. And when I went into this, I didn't even know the difference between it all. And whoa, was I like, it's a whole world in there with complex relationship and all that. I'd say like, but even like putting that aside, like the broker carrier relationship, Willis was really, I think, honestly forward thinking. So they kind of met us on the same level, which going back was very rare. It's kind of similar to my like success with my first company ever. My first experience ever in insurance was with Willis Towers Watson. It was extremely positive. It was like we're on the same page. Yes, they're brokers, so you'd think like they wouldn't care as much about a lot of the things that we brought to the table. But in their case, so they were working with small business. So this is back in 2018, before, small business, everyone's talking small business. They knew small business was a core piece of their business. They had, just a couple small teams focused on these small business accounts, and it's grown a lot since they've leveraged our technology. But the problem with small business is everybody knows it's fickle, right? It's hard to predict the behavior of a smaller company. It's much easier to know what Lacoste or Coca-Cola is going to be doing, but the mom and pop could be transitioning, could be on the verge of going out of business, could be there's a lot of variability in that segment, which is why they brought us in. They said, we don't have as much of a hold on it as we need to. So we need to bring in some advanced technology to actually start predicting when these smaller accounts have a propensity to do something. And not only when are they going to leave, but what else can we do to make their lives easier? Like, what's the next best product that actually makes sense in the right moment in time, not just when our boss thinks that we should make more money. So like they were truly about serving the customer, and they took it from that perspective, and they understood the challenge of this before we got there, which I think is the rare piece. Because, in my experience, everybody wants to talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, but they don't want to talk about data cleaning because that's not fun. And they don't want to talk about operationalizing because that's also not super fun. They just want AI, they want to predict. But Willis actually understood the whole picture, and they took a longer view, right? A lot of the companies I work with now or have in the past, they want it quick, they want it perfect, but they don't even know why they want it really. So a lot of my job has been talking people out of working with us, if you can believe it, when we were doing the LTV work, because it's a huge commitment. And if you're not willing to commit, like, you're not going to see a result, and we're going to look bad as well. So yeah, so I'd say they really were prepared for us at a time when a lot of others were not.
Yeah, I can only imagine, right? So I know folks have talked about lifetime value, but it's always been, I guess, a little bit more right theoretical. And I remember at some of the conference events that we ran into each other, I think beginning in 2019, and your pitch is being compared to a lot of other startups that are out there and their pitches, and there's just going to be like new revenue stream, right? A new product or new class of customers,
Right.
or efficiencies, right? So you're going to help reduce expenses operationally, or fraud detection and things like that. And here's the kind of lone guy. I mean, the good news is, right, nobody's necessarily directly competing with you in this lifetime value space. The bad news is,
Right.
like, it feels like it's out of left field relative to that value prop that everyone else is pitching.
Totally.
And so you kind of have some competition in the marketplace on that. So and I would imagine too that the view of AI and ML to solve problems like then versus now has got to be quite different. So you mentioned the data sets, right? 20, 30, 40 years of data, like and I imagine that's got to be pretty messy, to your point about like data cleansing and all that. Do you need that much data? And how did people, I guess, think about your technology then, and how has that perception maybe changed over time?
Yeah, it's night and day, but it's never been a lack of enthusiasm. Like, I got into all the rooms, and I went to all the conferences. Like, I'd run into you somewhere in the world. I was there because they were excited, right? Like, everyone's excited about, like, let's bring this advanced technology to what we're doing because it'll solve things, it'll fix things. But the reality is, we're just a tool, right? Like, you have to know. You have to. If you don't have the clean data, like, to your point, like, even 5 years of data can take a year to clean, because at a large carrier, talking about like a huge amount of customers, a lot of transactions, and there's honestly, Rob, there's like a truth to where AI is at the enterprise level today from my perspective, and it has nothing to do with predictions. We're not there, like, we're not in the prediction era yet. Like, we talk about the prediction era, and that's where you see the presentations. The money and the action and like where it all is today is actually the data engineering side, like the data cleaning, like the data understanding, the data organizing. This concept of a data lake is newer to the insurance space, but it's kind of like table stakes for AI, where the idea of the lake is it's just this really large repository of your data that's clean, that you can pull out at any time, that you can actually do machine learning on quickly, so that you can see. Because to do ML well, it has to be real time. It has to keep moving. You have to always get better from your mistakes. And without a lake, like, you're doing it on lags, and it'll never, ever be as good as if it's real time. So that, one example of an infrastructure problem. So like, that's really where AI, it's not fun. It's almost like I use the analogy of a restaurant, where it's like there's the front of the house, and and it all looks great, and everyone's like, prim and proper, and then the back, the kitchen is it's a mess, right? Like, and that's where this really is we're in that messy kitchen. Like, we're on the line, we got to clean this data. We got to put it in the right place, because if you don't do that, so what happened was, the carriers and the brokers are rushing off to do pilots, but they're not thinking like, how do we structure this correctly now? And then how are we structuring ourselves for success after? And so long story short, back then, and it's still today, like there's this huge rush to innovate and use cutting edge technology. If it's not AI, it's crypto. If whatever, like it's what's the next flavor that's going to help me. But if you're not holistically thinking about the problem and how to solve it in a valuable way, then it's a disaster for us, the startup, and for the champion and the carrier. So yeah, so it's changed a lot in that there's still enthusiasm, but now a better, there's been more scars from bad experiences, but it's still just the reality check is we're not as far as people think we are. And AI as a term, I think, is really dangerous. I think, being more specific is better. But, I've had to learn this over the years of actually like failing a lot with a lot of these companies. So.
Yeah, no, I think, they always talk about, right, this, the hype cycle, right? And then you hit this trough of disillusionment, and then over time, right, you actually eke out some hard-won gains, and it kind of proves out over time. So I'm interested, Alan, so obviously, right, AI and ML has become really big in the insurance space, and it can be applied to a number of different use cases, not just lifetime value. And I know you at Relativity6 have kind of ventured into some of these other use cases like industry classifications and others. So maybe you can just talk about, I hesitate to call it a pivot really, because it's really just enabling additional use cases. So how did you come across those, and what are the types of problems that you're solving today at Relativity6?
No, absolutely. And I know industry classification does not sound exciting when you say it, but it's actually really, really interesting. So here's what happened is COVID hit, those conferences went away. So Rob, we weren't seeing each other in Australia or wherever, random places, right? And
That's right.
Actually, a lot of the energy that we had around, that carriers had around innovation did go away for that period of time, right? So like we weren't as busy with the projects as we'd had been in the past. So we spent the time to really dig in and like to your earlier point, try to really understand what's going on with brokers and carriers, and like, what are some common themes that we're seeing here and have seen over the years, and how can we apply our technology in a way that can be used where we don't have to fly out and meet with a customer? We don't have to take their data. We don't have to like go through a 12-month procurement process. Like how do we change things up a little bit based on what we've already built? And we kept coming back to this idea that the insurance industry has a really hard time understanding what a business actually does. And that creates a lot of havoc within the whole value chain. So, simply put, the concept is an agent or broker at the time when they're talking to, let's say, a small business insurance prospect, they ask that customer, what do you do? And right there, that actually biases everything, because the customer, the prospective customer will say something, but it might not be actually what matters from an underwriter's perspective. So the broker doesn't really, isn't going to, triple check, quadruple check that. They're going to take it, give it to the carrier, and then, now now it's the onus of the underwriter to go in and check all that. And it sounds simple, but man, it's hard. If I gave you 5 business names and addresses and told you to match them to the 6-digit NAICS code that's most likely related to that company, that could take you some time. Like that's not a simple ask, actually. And one of our like little secrets within our LTV platform was always classification. If you don't know what a business does, you'll never be good at understanding a lot of things about their lifetime value, right? So we've always had this technology embedded within our platform, but we realized that it was so valuable to take it out and API it and make it its own offering after spending so long in the industry. So that's kind of what we did. We created an API that, you take a name and address of a business, and we'll find, through our platform, through a lot of semantic analysis, right? So we run it through our natural language processing engine to understand the naming conventions. We'll search the web based on the address. We're looking at all the, like, not only just the metadata, but we'll go into all the websites and start reading paragraphs, contextualizing, looking at images, Google Map searching, all these things. We put it in our data lake, which has about 6 billion external data points. This point, we've been building it for years. And what we output is a really accurate quick way to detect what a company does. So it's a classifier with over 1,000 variables, which is really cutting edge and difficult technology. But more importantly than all of that, it's really valuable to a carrier mainly. So we focus on commercial underwriting, specific small businesses where the value is really seen. Again, like we all know what Lacoste and Coca-Cola, like what they do, but that mom and pop store could be doing a lot of different things. The carpenter could be jumping on the roof, fixing something. The barber shop could be serving whiskey to someone while they're waiting, and that could be something valuable to know. But it's only on a Yelp review from 2016 that someone said the whiskey here was good. So we finally found a spot where we're adding a lot of value. We have an API, so it's very quickly integrated and useful. And we no longer need 10 to 40 years of historical transaction data to do our jobs and add value. So it's been exciting. You can call it a pivot. It totally is from a business model perspective. I guess the caveat is from a tech perspective, it's something that we've just been building since we started the company. We just had no idea, not being in the space, that it was something that on its own could be so impactful.
Yeah, I love that story, Alan. And I've seen this a lot actually during the pandemic where companies have, I would say, one or more core capabilities, but they've really rethought, right? Like, how do we deploy that? What is our true expertise? And, I've seen companies that have hardware offerings, but they're able to push new software upgrades, right? That kind of enable that hardware to do more and things like that. So I just, I tell people that when I talk to founders, and I'm always just amazed, right? Having never really been a founder myself. So I'm always so respectful of those like yourself that are really taking the jump. And I appreciate you being very candid about some of the risks and even kind of knowing, right, as you started as, Relativity6 as a co-founder, having gone through the highs and lows before, right, as a serial entrepreneur. And it's the same with writing a book. People ask about a second book, and I'm like, well, I know how much effort and time and effort the first one was. So it actually makes me maybe a little more gun shy to write a second one. But the problem, like any founder, I don't care, and I've talked to hundreds, right, maybe even thousands by now. I don't think once when they've articulated the basic problem that they're trying to solve, I don't think I've ever once said, that's actually not a problem. Like that works fine today. But it's the solution, right? And how do I solve this, or what is the challenge, and how do I create a viable business out of this? That whatever you go in with, I don't think I've ever met a founder that they got it right first time off the bat. No challenges, no obstacles, no twists and turns, right? And so it's always a journey. It's always some hard-earned lessons learned, and I think Relativity6 is no different in that. But I applaud you for kind of both the innovation that you've done from the very beginning, but then also kind of recognizing that there's, different ways to kind of deploy capabilities. And, you've still got that tech core, right, which enables everything, but it can be applied in different ways to solve different problems within the insurance industry. So just kind of wrapping up, I'm curious, how can people find you, and what's, I guess, on the horizon for Relativity6 now that we're kind of getting out of our pandemic funk here, now that in-person events are starting up, and obviously you're able to interact with more. I don't know if you have any thoughts for kind of what the future looks like in the next 1 to 3 years.
Yeah, no, excited for in-person events. I actually found out this week, so totally off topic, but I actually haven't been able to walk all year. I've had a problem with my leg, but I finally figured out what it is. I have a torn labrum, so I'm getting that stitched up, and I will, be stitched up and ready to go for Vegas for the big conference, of course. Excited for all the in-person stuff. I think it really matters, even though we have an API and you never have to talk to me ever to see value in what we do. I think it's there is a people element even to an API business, a data provider business. It's still really important. Use cases matter a lot. There's always reason to do that, is what I found, which is cool. I thought that might go away, but yeah. And then, in terms of other ways, would love to connect with anyone. My email is alan@relativity6.com. always go to our website, always down to talk to anyone interested in learning more about this. And yeah, I mean, the future, but in terms of just the future and where we're headed, I think it's the discipline to stay away from the buzzwords, I think, is the key here. Like, yes, AI is valuable, but what does AI really mean in the context of underwriting, in the context of a lot of different things? I think the carrier and broker counterparts are getting much savvier than they were just even like 2017, 2018 and how to interact with these companies. So I honestly think the future is bright, but the caveat is there does need to be a reality check of what's feasible and what's not. And, everyone does need to do a better job of kind of getting on the same page and investing, not just like, in e-commerce, like you can try a million different things and like plug them in and out as you go. But in insurance, there's a longer cycle. You have to like work a little bit closer with your startup counterparts, I think. And, the behavior is getting better, but there's always room for improvement, I think. I'm really excited to see what we can do, I think, moving forward. I think everyone's got the energy to go back and do it now that we're reemerging. And yeah, the positive outlook, Rob.
That's awesome. Injury, definitely time to get that healed. I know my wife's been dealing with some knee issues and been kind of limping and struggling to get around. And it looks like she's got some surgery in her future that she found out this week. So I definitely appreciate, but it's you don't like to do it, but on the other hand, it's like, you'd rather get back to where you could be rather than kind of being half of what you're able to do. So good luck on that, and it's been great to catch up here. For our listeners, I've got a couple news items this week that I want to wrap up with. The first one comes to us from the Insurance Journal, and this is kind of exciting news. We'll see what comes of it. That 7 major cyber insurers have formed a company to coordinate cyber analysis and have risk mitigation. So with cyber attacks, as we know, we've talked about previously on this podcast, and insurance claims on the rise, leading cyber insurers AIG, Axis, Beasley, Chubb, The Hartford, Liberty Mutual, and Travelers have formed a company to pool their data and expertise and take collective efforts to enhance cyber risk mitigation efforts across the industry. So this new entity is going to be called Cyber AccuView. I don't know if I like that name, Alan. Your thoughts on a marketing perspective?
I know. I think we should do a branding workshop on that one. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not loving the name, but what do you think of this idea?
Yeah, I think it's necessary. I think there's a bit of flying blind with all this stuff. There's it's being led by a lot of perception. I think for years, companies have done really well with these types of products, but I think it is coming to a head a little bit, and these companies understand that they're getting in front of it. They just need more data, right? Like there's not enough information out there. Clearly, like there's a reflection of that. So I think it's like it's an interesting signal that carriers are getting more serious about it, but that it still hasn't been figured out, which is interesting. Like that, as an entrepreneur, that sounds like an opportunity, honestly.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of chatter on Twitter and elsewhere just about insurance's role in a lot of these ransomware attacks, and are we now enabling this bad behavior by offering these types of solutions? So there's some ethics and moral aspect to it, and I know this government has certainly encouraged a little bit more sharing among parties, and so it's definitely a difficult challenge that is not going away. The other item this week for news, this comes from our friend Dr. Robin Cura, who we've previously had on the podcast, an article that he wrote for the Insurance Innovation Reporter. Is insurance missing out on the crypto opportunity? So I encourage you guys to go check out that piece, and would love to hear your thoughts on this. You've probably heard all about the crypto mania. We've seen the crackdowns on mining in China. They're actually coming out with a central bank digital currency, and I read a book by Richard Turin called Cashless that's all about that effort, which was quite fascinating. So I recommend that read. But I personally am not interested in crypto. I actually read The Kings of Crypto, which is about Coinbase as well, which is an excellent book. So I love the idea of crypto. I don't like the roller coaster of crypto. I'm very interested in the central bank digital currencies. And I know that some companies have said they're going to start taking premiums in Bitcoin and others. So
yeah, I heard that.
Curious your thoughts, Alan. Where do you stand in the crypto world? What are your broad thoughts here?
No, I mean, I think it's interesting. Like you said, it's really, really interesting to see companies actually accept premiums in Bitcoin or whatever it is. But it's kind of like AI, honestly. It feels like the same story, right? Like a lot of hype, a lot of people talking about it. Where's the value and how is it implemented? And like, I see a lot of pain ahead if you try to implement without really like holistically understanding what the tech does and how is it actually going to like help the operation or help your customers, which is not as exciting as just thinking about crypto in general. So I'm like apprehensive. I agree with you. I'm not a huge like crypto head. I try to kind of stay away because of all the volatility, but it is incredibly interesting. And I think it's just going to be a long time. It's going to take a lot longer than people think.
Yeah, I definitely think there's utility in some of these. I'm very interested in Ethereum and smart contracts. And, they were even saying with the central bank digital currency that has the ability to actually implement negative interest rates to where your money in your crypto wallet could decrease in value over time if you don't spend it. And so anyway, or they could be limited to what you could spend it on and kind of avoid some of the
I need that
criminal activities and things like that. So yeah, right. Yeah, we all need a little bit of a budget. Yeah. No, you can't spend it at the fast food. You've got to only spend this money on salads exactly. Or something. Exactly. So anyway, I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but I definitely think there's some intersections with the insurance world and kind of look forward to hearing listener thoughts. And I'm sure it's a topic we will come to often as we have future episodes of the podcast. Well, with that, I want to thank again Alan Ringvald from Relativity6. It's so great to catch up with you. Best wishes for now the rest of the year, and hopefully we will be able to see each other in person in Las Vegas. So we'll have to make sure that happens.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Rob.
And thanks to all of you out in listener land. This has been Rob Galbraith flying solo this week. The Insurtech Geek podcast is powered by JB Knowledge at jbknowledge.com. It's all about technology that is transforming and disrupting the insurance world. I've been your solo host this week, Rob Galbraith at innovatinsurance.com. You can find my esteemed co-host, James Benham, at jamesbenham.com. Thanks to Jim Greenlee, our podcast producer, and Kara Dalton-Aro, who's our creative producer. And thank you for joining us today in Listener Land. I look forward to talking to you soon. We're taking you on a journey through insurance tech. So enjoy the ride and geek out. Have a great week, everyone.